What is up, YouTube? HPJ here, and I'm coming at you guys today because we have another archetype video. This time we're going to be visiting the archetypes of the elementals. The elementals, as you know, are a series of monsters who correspond with the 6 attributes that Yu-Gi-Oh has: dark, water, light, fire, wind, and earth. You may also know that this archetype is split into twos. We have the elemental lords, who are known in the OCG as the spirit gods, and those that worship and praise under them, the element sabers. These monsters, funny enough, did not come out till later on in the span of Yu-Gi-Oh!, as well as the fact that the elemental lords did not receive their light and dark monsters till later on. Now, a unique thing about each of the elemental lords is that they share a list of things in correspondent to each other. The first is that the elemental lords are known who are known in the OCG as the spirit gods, share the ability to special summon themselves from the hand by having at least 5 monsters of their corresponding attributes in the graveyard. In addition to that, they share the same attack, defense, and level as each other, and that their other unique ability is that whenever they leave the field during your next turn, you cannot conduct battle phase. So it is a drawback to these monsters. They first started their release in the set Return of the Duelist. Fun fact is that each of the sets, in sequential order: Return of the Duelist, Abyss Rising, Cosmo Blazer, and Lord of the Tachyon Galaxy, only accumulated the first 4 out of 6 of the elemental lords, and those corresponding sets reflected on support for those corresponding monsters in terms of their attributes, being as that one represented Earth for Return of the Duelist, Abyss Rising consisted of water, Cosmo Blazer consisted of fire, and Lord of the Tachyon Galaxy consisted of wind. It wasn't until later on where the elemental sabers were introduced in these sets of Flames of Destruction, and more with support was released in Cybernetic Horizon, where the other elemental lords, light and dark, did join in. The elemental lords, in terms of everything else, also correspond with the occasion of these forbidden cards. Many of them did get unbanned, some of them had their effects changed due to how powerful their original versions were. And of course, the elemental sabers have a lot of their own unique abilities as well. For that, if they sit in the graveyard, they can once a turn change their attributes to a different attribute of your choice. This is a great way to help them summon the elemental lords, as well as some of them having some unique abilities as well to help circumvent the elemental lords being in your hand on the field, or being able to be somewhere to where you can choose them. So now that we've gotten that all out of the way, why don't we go ahead and get started with the elemental lords. We're actually going to start in order of their release, and it goes on with Grand Soil, the elemental lord, known in the LCG as Grand Soil, the earth spirit god. This monster's effect corresponds as when this card is social summoned, you can target one monster in either player's graveyard and social summon that target. You can only use this effect of Grand Soil, the elemental lord, once per turn. Elemental Lord Grand Soil's counterpart in terms of the elemental sabers is Elemental Saber Anna. Her her unique ability is that she can send one elemental saber monster from your hand to the graveyard, then target one elemental saber monster except for elemental saber Anna, or an elemental lord that was properly has been properly summoned in your graveyard, and social summon it, ignoring its summoning conditions. Both of these monsters have a play on the effects of the normal spell card, Monster Reborn, which has the ability to target one monster in the graveyard and special summon it. The unique thing about Monster Reborn is that Monster Reborn has the ability to specially summon any monster. However, the monster at least needs to be properly summoned, so cards like Chaos Sorcerer and ritual monsters and stuff like that, they at least have to be properly special summoned. This does not accuse monsters who have the effect that they cannot be normal summoners that can only be special summoned by this way. So unfortunately, Reward cannot get over them, but I believe there's a trap card that does. And I can't get monsters ignoring that condition as well. But yes, that is Grand Soil. And fun fact about Grand Soil, he was the only elemental lord out of all the elemental lords to be forbidden because of how abusable his effect was originally, where he was not limited to once per turn. Grand Soil did have to get reworded. Actually, all of the elemental lords prior to the release of Windrose all had to be reworded and reprinted due to how broken the effects were and how easy it was to return these cards to the hand with other card effects to correspond with it. Most likely Grand Soil, who had the ability to Monster Reborn, other monsters. And at that point, he did get unbanned, but he got reworded to where his effect was not abusable. Next up is Glacia, the Elemental Lord, known in the OCG as Glacia, the Water Spirit God. When this card is special summoned, discard two random cards from your opponent's hand, or their entire hand if they have less than two. Well, Glacia's corresponding monster is Elemental Saber Nalu. Once a turn, you can send one Elemental Saber monster from your hand to graveyard to target one Elemental Saber or Elemental Lord monster in your graveyard except for Elemental Saber Nalu and add it to your hand. Elemental Saber Nalu and Glacia deal with hand dis- hand alterations, which is similar to the card Delinquent Duo, which actually, Glacia is taking advantage of, not Nalu. But, anyways, yes, Glacia is copying the effects of Delinquent Duo, which is a normal spell, and its effect reads: pay 1,000 life points. Your opponent discards one random card from their hand, and then they choose any card from their hand and discard one more card of their choice. This is the effect. This card is the only one of the elemental is one of the cards that the elemental lords reflect that has not been moved off the Forbidden Limited list. It's fun fact to note that this is one of the most broken. This is a really extremely broken spell card, which is why it has not been moved at the time of this recording because of how powerful this card is. If this card did have any more bad draws, maybe it would be um unbanned, but Delinquent Duo is one nasty card to deal with and has been one of the oldest cards in the game to still be forbidden. More fun facts about Glacia is that Glacia has been used in a ton of water decks, primarily Mermill Abyss. For the fact that Glacia is able to be searched thanks to a lot of the Atlanteans who have the ability to search for Glacia with ease. Next up is Pyrorex, the Elemental Lord, known in the OCG as Pyrorex, the Flame Spirit God. Its effect is that when it's special summoned, you target one monster your opponent controls and destroy it. And if you do, both players take damage equal to half of the original attack of the destroyed monster. The corresponding Elemental Saber monster for Pyrorex is Elemental Saber Malo. Once a turn, you can send one Elemental Saber monster from your hand to the graveyard. Send one Elemental Saber monster or Elemental Lord monster from your deck to the graveyard, except for Elemental Saber Malo. Pyrorex's ability is a play on the effects of Ring of Destruction. Ring of Destruction is a normal trap. It has the effects of during your opponent's turn, target one face-up monster your opponent controls whose attack is less than or equal to their life points. Destroy that monster, and if you do, take damage equal to its original attack. Then inflict damage to your opponent equal to the damage you took. You can only use one. You'll activate one Ring of Destruction per turn. Ring of Destruction is another one of those old school favorite cards that was forbidden It did not have actually this original effect. The effect of Ring of Destruction originally was that it was able to target any monster on the field that was face up, destroy that monster, then inflict damage to both players, equal to the attack of the monster. The current attack of the monster that was destroyed by this card's effect. Because of how broken this card was in a lot of decks and created many problematic situations, Ring of Destruction had to be forbidden because of how broken it was. Then it was released, but it had to have its effect altered so that you can abuse multiple Ring of Destructions at once. You have to activate this card on your opponent's turn, and you can only use it on your opponent's monster. Being is that sometimes during when this card was not banned, you could use this card's effect on your own cards and circumvent either the cards not being destroyed or the fact that there were corresponding cards that did other effects when you destroyed them in addition. So Ring of Destruction did ultimately come back. This is actually the OCG's artwork for Ring of Destruction, as the TCG's artwork has flames surrounding the ring itself, while the OCG version has grenades. We move on to the next elemental lord, and that is Windrose, the elemental lord, known in the LCG as Windrose, the wind spirit god. When this card is special summoned, destroy all spells and trap cards your opponent controls. You can only use this effect of Windrose, the elemental lord, once per turn. Windrose's elemental saber counterpart is elemental saber Makani. Once a turn, you can send one elemental saber monster from your hand to the graveyard. Add one elemental saber or elemental lord monster from your deck to your hand, except elemental saber Makani. When Rose, the elemental lord's effect is the exact effect of Harpie's Feather Duster, which its effect is to destroy all spells and trap cards your opponent controls. The fun fact of Harpie's Feather Duster is that it took approximately 5 years later in the TCG for it to be unbanned, while the OCG had this card banned 5 years prior to. This card was one of the longest spell cards on the Forbidden Limited list, and fun fact, also to note that it's one of the only cards on the Forbidden Limited list. One of the card's effects that out of all the Elemental Lords has not that was actually forbidden for a good period of time. The Liquid Duo did not stay. The Liquid Duo was part of the limited list, as well as Regeki and Reborn, and even Sangan and Ring, which a lot of the Elemental Lords effects copy. However, some of those cards lasted a little longer off the list than Duster, and it wasn't in. Is actually quite funny because Delinquent Duo was still around about 2 years more than Feather Duster. Raigeki has been on the list 2 years more than Duster, and Ring of Destruction a good 5 years more than Duster. While Reborn, I believe, was also a good 10 years before Duster. So, we move on from that and we move on to Oh, the Umbra Mirage, known as Umbra Mirage, the Elemental Lord, known in the LCG as Obliterate Mirage, the Dark Spirit God. If this card is special summoned, add one level 5. Add one monster from your deck with 15 or less attack to your hand. You only use the effect of Umbra Mirage, the Elemental Lord, once per turn. Its corresponding Elemental Saber monster is Elemental Saber Molehu. Once a turn, quick effect, you can send one Elemental Saber monster from your hand to the graveyard, then target one face-up monster on the field and change it to the face-down defense position. So Umbra Mirage is copying the effects of Sangan. Well, the original effects of Sangan. For Sangan's original effect was, if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can add one monster with 15 or less attack from your deck to your hand. Sangan ultimately itself was forbidden as of 2013, I believe, where Sangan's effect was completely broken at that time because so many different cards and effects could take advantage of Sangan. Sangan did ultimately get unbanned years later, however, Sangan's effect had to be altered to where Sangan's new effect says, yes, it still has its original effect text where this card is sent from the field to the graveyard. You can add one monster with 15 or less attack from your deck to your hand. But you cannot activate cards or the effects of cards that share the same name for the rest of the turn, and you only use one Sangan effect per turn. So, if you had multiple Sangans, you cannot use their effects to search multiple times. Sadly enough, that was how most players got advantage of Sangan because there were so many decks that could take advantage of multiple Sangan's effects in multiple ways of doing such. Singing was ultimately banned and then brought back and then reworded, kind of similar to its counterpart, Witch of the Black Forest, who she was on the Forbidden Limited list longer than Sangan due to how Sangan had how she had more targets in terms of high level monsters than Sangan did. But ultimately, both of them had monsters they can easily take advantage of in terms of searching out through the deck. Next up is, and I'm gonna try my best to pronounce this name. This is Fauxfur Rage, the Elemental Lord, known in the OCG as Force Courage, this light spirit god. When this card is special summoned, you can destroy all monsters your opponent controls. You can only use the effect um, of Fauxfur Rage, the Elemental Lord, once per turn. Its corresponding Elemental Saber monster is actually not one, but two monsters. You have Elemental Saber Lapis Lula, once a turn, when a spell or trap is activated, quick effect, you can send one elemental saber monster from your hand to graveyard, negate the activation. If you do, destroy that card. Then we have the elemental saber Lapis Mana, uh, Lap, Lapis Lula Mana. Sorry, I got that incorrect. You can send two other monsters from your hand to the graveyard, so summon this card from your hand. You'll use this effect of Elemental Saber Laza Mana once per turn. Apply the following effects to Elemental Saber and Elemental monsters, depending on the original attribute of any Elemental Saber monster sent to the graveyard by this card's effect. If you send and wind or earth, cannot be destroyed by battle. If you send water or fire, cannot be destroyed by effects. And if you send light or dark, your opponent cannot target target it with card effects. Now, being as how the Elemental Lord itself, Rye Rage, is actually has this effect based off of Raigeki, the normal spell, and its effect is to destroy all monsters your opponent controls. Raigeki was one of the longest spells on the Forbidden Limited list, and funny enough, it's one of the many of the spells and trap cards that were on the original Forbidden Limited list that did not get moved until later on. I believe it was about 2014 uh, yeah, about 2014 when this card finally got unbanned from the Forbidden Limited list. Regeki is a very powerful spell, nonetheless, and unlike its counterpart, Dark Hole, but similar to its counterpart, Harpie's Feather Duster, Regeki deals with monsters, Duster deals with spells and traps. Dark Hole has the ability to destroy all monsters on the field. Regeki only focuses on your opponent. And being as that, we do have some support cards for the Elemental Sabers and Lords. We have Palace of the Elemental Lords, known in the LCG as Temple of the Spirit Gods. All monsters you control gain attack and defense equal to the number of different attributes in your graveyard times 200. Once a turn, you can add one Elemental Saber monster from your deck to your hand, but skip your next battle. Hit the battle phase of your next turn, even if the card leaves the field. Once a turn, if an Elemental Saber monster in your hand or field would be sent to the grave, sent by a card's yeah, would be sent would send a card or cards from the hand to the graveyard by activating this effect. You can send any number of elemental saber monsters from your deck to the graveyard instead. Then we have the continuous trap card, Elemental Training. Your opponent cannot target Palace of the Elemental Lords you control with card effects. Also, it cannot be destroyed by card effects. Once a turn, you contribute one monster to summon one Elemental Saber monster from your deck with a different original attribute than that monster. You can send this face of the card to the graveyard and discard your entire hand to add one elemental lord monster from your graveyard to your hand equal to the number of cards you discarded. So that is pretty much it for the entire elemental lord and saber archetype. Wish they had a bit more some stable support. I honestly think this is really cool concept of how they did it. It's kind of similar to how we had the, um, the dragon rulers and the baby and adult monsters. They really didn't have much in certain genre, but because of where they stood as monsters of different attributes, and then the ability to spawn with dragons. Yeah, that is Konami knew what they was doing and tried to make sure something just didn't get broken, but unfortunately that was too late. But luckily we're able to catch it in time to revise it. So that's gonna end that's gonna wrap up this video here. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, and of course hit the notification bell so you guys can be informed of when I do upload more content. In the description box below, of course, is all my social media links. You guys can interact with me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Discord, and all of that, as well as the Patreon. So you guys, if you want to, can support the channel, free of choice if you do such, and possibly can have your name shouted out or have some ideas turned into videos. You never know. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you all next time. HPJ, signing out. Take care.